seated.
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 There you go.
That's a better way to put it.
Gary Chickering showed up late, right?
Correct.
And then one of the alternates was de-seated. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm splitting hairs here, George, and I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So Gary is listed as absent, not tardy.
Then he comes in. And one of us was seated for him.
Well, I was seated for Rick, and Rick came in late. But did Gary come in late?
I was the only operating alternate because I was making motions like a crazy one.
Did Gary really come in? Did he come late?
Did it say that he was going to do that?
Feeling a little foggy on that one.
So we should have meeting more frequently so we can remember.
No, it was Rick that came late.
No, I don't think Gary showed up at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Gary was even
Not
there.
showing at all, that's correct. Gary was not.
Gary was not here. Ed says so. He's got the tape.
Okay, anyway.
Any other suggestions or comments?
I would motion that we accept the minutes as amended.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Did you get that, George? Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. Any abstentions?
Actually, I should abstain because I was not there.
There we go.
I still would accept them. I think
They're very
Amended.
nice. They're very nice. Yes. Okay. Moving right along. Okay. Old business, conditional use application. Now, if you notice there in the minutes of the last meeting, under item 4, Roman numeral 6, number 3, there was some discussion as to what constitutes the renewal of a conditional use approval. Chairman Welton volunteered to confer with town attorney in order to discuss the definition of renewal. So I sent an email to Laura. I have to kind of work backwards through the emails. Okay. October 27th, I sent her this email. Laura, the Brookfield Planning Board has been working for several months to finalize the application for conditional use permit within the REC1 district, Moose Mountain Ski Area. At our October meeting, the board came up with 2 questions which require your guidance. Number 1, who sets the time period for a conditional use permit? Does the applicant need to specify a length of time, 1, 2, 5 years, etc., for a permit, or is it entirely up to the board? Second question is, if a conditional use permit were to expire or lapse for any length of time, a day, a month, a year, over a year, and the landowner then submitted an application to continue that use that expired or lapsed with no changes to the activities related to the use, would this be an application for a new use since it had expired or a renewal of an existing use? We will meet next on November 14th. We'd appreciate your replies so the board can discuss that issue at that time. Her first response was, Tom, conditional use permits like special exceptions or variances run with the land and are good forever. Unless the applicant applies for a permit for a specific period of time, in which case the application is limited by its own terms to that period. Please let me know if you have any additional questions. So when I read that, I thought that's 180 degrees opposite of what I had understood a conditional use permit to be. So I responded, Laura, can the planning board put a time limit on the conditional use permit? For example, the applicant applies for a conditional use permit and the board agrees, goes through the process and approved the conditional use permit with the condition that the conditional use permit expires in 5 years. Is this legal? Her response, hi Tom, no. Just as the zoning board could not put a time frame on a variance or special exception unless requested to do so by the applicant, the planning board cannot put time limits on conditional use permits unless requested by the applicant. So that kind of stopped me. That's 180 degrees the opposite of what I thought we were developing, that a conditional use permit would say, okay, we can do this use for 5 years and if it works out. Right. But what this series of emails back and forth, our questions from the board, have revealed is that the conditions only apply to the limitations on the use that we allow.
The first time around.
Right. So the first time around somebody applies for something, it's forever. So if, say, the current owner or future owner goes through that conditional use list, I can't think of any off the top of my head, let's just say ice cream cone stand, just for the heck of it, and the owner applies for an ice cream cone stand up there, and it's on the list, and we go through the whole process with all the correct methodology, and we approve it, the only way a time limit can be put on it is if the owner requests a time limit. And that was, if I think back to the meeting, that was Cliff's point. Because everyone else here was saying, no, we can put a time limit on it. And Cliff said, no. He can put a time limit on it. And that's what brought up the discussion of let's call Laura and get the answer. So is everybody else shocked by this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shocked, maybe no, just surprised, I don't know. I just had it all backwards.
Well, so speaking right off the top of the process that we're going to go through for conditional uses, public hearing, the butters, the
Site plan.
whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we give permission for it,
It's forever.
Forever.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't expire, ever.
That's big.
Mm-hmm.
Could we request of the applicant, to apply a time limit? Or does that have to?
I don't know.
Will that be requesting
I think-
a full new submittal?
If I were the owner of that land,
I'd say
and the
no.
board came to me and said, hey, could you possibly maybe do it for 5 years? I'd say no, because that would reduce the value of the property.
Say no.
Because you can't, even if you want to sell
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, Rob?
Our zoning, page 6 of 53,
Mm-hmm.
Roman numeral 2 at the top. A conditional use permit may place reasonable limits on the conditional use such as, but not limited to, the maximum number of attendees, hours of operation, public safety conditions, expiration date of the permit, and frequency or specific number of occurrences. This permit may place further restrictions in order to protect the residential agricultural character of the town. Roman numeral 3, Roman numeral 4 talks about renewal. It says, the applicant may apply for a renewal of a conditional use permit up to 60 days prior to it expiring. In processing a renewal request, the planning board may hold a public hearing.
Interesting question.
Our zoning ordinance
Mm-hmm.
was written with the idea that these things
Mm-hmm.
will have expirations.
I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, it's all there on paper. But here we have our town attorney who supposedly looked at that.
Well, which supersedes
I think the state law supersedes.
State law supersedes.
I'm assuming she's going off of state law.
I'm assuming the same thing, and I assume that what we say in our town goes more than what the state says.
If we're more restrictive
6.
We are,
on,
which we are.
well, yeah, but well, how does that work?
You just.
Oh, jeez, I get up at 4 in the morning. Tired. Seaweed's kicking my butt.
So were you perhaps thinking that we can be more restrictive than the state law?
Typically, the towns can make,
They could,
towns can make things more
Embellish.
restrictive than the state,
Right.
obviously.
not less.
Yeah.
maybe what we should do is send her an electronic copy of the zoning and say, look at this specific piece, this is the way we thought it was, that she approved. And she might have approved it thinking that you have to have some sort of language in there in case the guy actually, or whatever owner, actually requests a time limit on it. If somebody on the other side of the table actually requested a time limit of 1 year, 2 year, 10 years, whatever, that you actually have some sort of functionality in there to renew it, if that would ever come up. Maybe she was looking at it from that angle.
I
Robert?
think another question, or line of questioning to ask her would be, can we, unless it's really clear that the conditional use and the parameters around it, we feel very comfortable allowing that forever, that we can just not, choose to not allow the conditional use unless it has a reasonable expiration on it?
Well, that would be our responsibility. If we're not agreeing to allow that forever, we would have to deny the application
Well,
entirely.
I mean, that we would like to have that amount of control, but the law may not allow us to have that control.
right.
I mean,
The thing that disturbs me is that as I'm not mistaken, that the voters of Brookfield have voted in that ordinance, and that's the way they want it. And it's not right that the state could say, no.
Well, any superseding a government agency versus a federal agency, any state agency must be at least as restrictive, according to this federal law, must be at least as restrictive and can be more so by state regulation. And would that still apply from state regulation to a superseding municipal?
Yes.
We'll find out.
That's what we've got to check into, because we could be more restrictive as the federal law applies to state agencies versus state agencies to a municipal.
This kind of brings up another question that we're going to get to later regarding making changes to the zoning, because there's something coming up in the agenda that has to do with that. And I want to know from her that if she's 100% right and we misinterpreted it and it somehow got into our zoning after all this time and she reviewed it,
That's have another look at that ordinance.
is our zoning defective?
Exactly.
And that's a pretty serious question. So we need to, I need to send this email right back to her immediately tomorrow and answer these questions, get these questions answered. Because if we somehow got through into the zoning
It's our
something that is legally incorrect, that's not good. Yes.
I'm less concerned about it being legally incorrect, because worst case, you know,
It's
that-
separable.
I mean, it just will, the law will prevail,
Mhm.
right? The right thing will happen.
Mhm.
May involve a lot of legal fees, but the right thing will happen eventually. So I'm not overly concerned about that. What I am concerned about is that the voters of this town had a certain understanding when they voted yea or nay on that zoning ordinance change, that they would have, that their board, their elected board, us, would have some control over those conditional uses. And I'm sure there's somebody out there who, if they thought, you know, that we would be, not have some, a lot of control over those and how those be implemented, they may well have voted no. And so that's my concern, is that the voters made an uninformed, if the voters made an uninformed decision, that's a big deal to me.
Yes.
Absolutely, because we were chosen as the representatives. And
No, they
we don't
voted-
have the
they-
authority-
wait,
we don't have
they-
the
no, they-
authority to use to represent the properly.
Well, the legislative body, the voters voted this in, right?
Yes.
But that was based on representations from the planning board and the
Absolutely.
committee that worked on that, you know, Goody and I think Jim and others, right? There were a lot of people involved in this.
Absolutely.
We mustn't forget that there was also a lawsuit.
Well, we had quite a bit of legal trouble
Right.
with the last
So
major
this is-
issue we had.
This is this ball of wax that we've been dealing with, but
Mhm.
I thought, I was under the impression that with this, what we did was right. God knows we worked on it long enough.
And that's what my impression too
And she
was
was
too.
involved.
Yes, she was.
If, as Rob says, that law supersedes our representation of the people, then therefore
No,
we should definitely have this gone over very
then
thoroughly.
there's no reason for.
Because we are entrusted with that by our residents,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't shirk that responsibility. I would think that would